Hey everybody, and welcome back to this video in which we will continue creating the custom chair that we modeled in the previous parts of this video. So in case you haven't watched those, feel free and check them out, as we will continue where we stopped in the previous video where we did the UVW unwrapping. So if you followed along, this is where you should be at so far. I have this model, which is the simplified low poly version, as well as the higher poly version. Not much difference in both of these, but it does make a difference when you turn on the polygon counts, and you see that this one has about 5,500 polygons. At the same time, the high poly has about 33,000. So it's simplified and easier to unwrap. All right, so now I want to prep both of these models so that we can do the texture baking, so we can get the extra bit of details we have on the high poly model from here over down to the low poly model. So for this, I will be using Substance Painter. So in case you don't have it, you'll be able to see how this thing works, or how the software works, and later on maybe you'll decide to buy it. So let's get started. First thing that I want to do here is get all of the elements that I'm going to need to get a proper bake. What this means, we're gonna have to create a bit of a naming convention so that all the details from the high poly are baked over to the low poly without any artifacts. So for this, what I'm gonna do is, first of all, I'm going to start combining some of the meshes together. So for this, I'm going to move it to the side so it's not in the way. So now what I want to do is get these three, or the back sides of the chair. I want to attach them all together, like so. And I'm going to call them 01 HP. HP standing for high poly. I do have some, and as soon as this thing is named, I'm going to hide it. Now I'm going to select the back sides here, and again I want to attach it with these three, and the only thing that I'm following is that I'm making sure that these individual elements are not touching each other. So if they're not touching each other, they can be part of the same group. So I'm going to call this 02 HP. I'm going to hide it again. Now these are remnants of what we used for the cloth simulation, so I don't need this, so I'm going to delete them. I'm also going to delete the control points for the simulation, and go back here. For this, call this 03 HP, and hide it. Call this 04 HP and hide it. And since these are all going to have the same material, but they're not touching itself or touching each other, not touching themselves, but we can attach them all together, and now call these 05 HP. All right, so if we're done with this is how your high poly layer should look like. So we have 5 elements, and those are the elements that make this chair. Now what we want to do is get this high poly hidden, open up the low poly, and do the same exact thing, but with a bit of a twist, where now, since this is an entire model, we're going to have to go in and basically detach these as separate elements. So detaches an element, make sure it's not a clone, so click OK. And once this thing is detached, name this 01 LP. Just make sure that the 01 LP, if we had it here, will be the same as the 01 HP. All right, so next thing that we want to do is select the low poly version for this piece. So the backrest, again, 1, 2, 3, detach, select it and call it 02LP and hide. Awesome. Now let's check out the 03. It's the handrest, and the 04 is the bottom part. So hide, detach 03, detach 04, and name them accordingly: 03 LP, 04 LP. And the only thing that's left is the connectors, and they can be the 05 LP. So with this, we now have the low poly and the high poly both with the correct naming convention. So now what we want to do is select, make sure we have everything selected only from the low poly. We want to keep the high poly hidden. So we just select the low poly, and we want to export this. So click export and name this as a, first of all, make sure it's an OBJ, and name this LP bake, or you can use whatever naming convention you want. I prefer to put a LP because this is the low poly and this is going to be used for baking. So hit save, click export. I'm not going to change any of these settings. If you have something changed, well, feel free and copy what you're seeing here. So hit export, click done. As soon as the LP is done, hide the low poly, select the high poly, and do the same thing again. Just this time, instead of hitting LP bake, just call this HP bake and click save. Again, export, not changing anything, and there we go. So with this done, we basically have both of these objects prepped for baking in Substance Painter. Here we are inside Substance Painter 2017.2.0. This is the current version that's out. If you're watching this at a later date, you probably have a newer version, and if you're using an older version, you can update to this one. It really doesn't matter, because Substance Painter is like more or less like a living matter. It keeps updating with newer and better stuff. And if this is the first time you're seeing Substance Painter, well, don't worry. It's not a very complicated software, and I will try to keep it as simple as possible and something to tend to the totally new user to this software. So once you start Substance Painter, this is what you're seeing. As you might notice, you have a lot of options around here. There is a shelf over here with a lot of different buttons, a lot of menus, so don't worry, we won't go deep into any of these. What I want to do here is, first of all, I want to start the project. So for this, I'm gonna hit File and click New. From here, the first thing that you need to choose is as a new project is the template. By default, I think this thing is set to PBR metallic roughness. You can use this, or since we're going to be using this in Unreal, you can choose to have the Unreal Engine 4 preset, which is basically going to take all of the data that we create in here and pack it into a compact texture that we can later use in Unreal. So I'm going to choose Unreal Engine 4 for this. And here we have the document resolution, which is the resolution in which we will be seeing inside our work window or the UI. Don't worry, we can change this without any loss of texture quality. So for now, I'm going to use a 2048. And now the thing that I need to do is select which mesh I would like to work on. So I'm going to click on the select. And from here, I'm going to choose my LP bake. This is the object that we just exported out of 3ds Max. So hit open and click OK. As soon as we do that, we're gonna see that we have our model over here. Now, the first thing you need to know how to move is inside your viewport. Basically, to move around the viewport, hold on Alt, left click, and you can basically rotate around. Holding Alt and right click will allow you to basically zoom in and out, and Alt and middle click will allow you to pan around the view. So very simple, very easy to work with, and in a few minutes it basically gets to be a second nature, so you won't even be thinking about how to use it. So as soon as this thing is in, what basically Substance Painter is a software used for making textures. And the great thing about Substance Painter is that it has an amazing texture baker. So we can basically use Substance Painter to bake all the details from the high poly model over to this lower poly model. The baker is very easy to work as well. So all we have to do is on this left side, you have this bake textures. If you have a smaller screen or a bigger screen, just or even maybe if this thing is even collapsed, if you can find the texture set settings, below it here you will find this additional maps bake textures. Click on this button and this menu will appear. Now, even though there are a lot of options here, the baking here can be very simple if you don't know what you're doing at the beginning. So since this is the first, I'm going to take into account that this is the first time you're watching this or seeing this. What you're seeing here is basically the textures that you will be baking. In this side, we have normals, world space normals, ID, ambient, occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. In this case, I will not be needing an ID nor a thickness map, so I don't need to bake those. Now, on this side, you basically have an output size. I'm going to use a 4K resolution texture, so I'm going to have a better resolution. And this is the high poly parameters. This is basically where you're going to input the data from the high poly model. So in order to do that, all you have to do is just click on this little icon over here. It looks like a folded page on the side. So click here and now choose the HP Bake and click open. This thing will basically take into account all the details or all the information from the high poly. Now we can bake like this, but we might have a bit of a problem because we're going to have some overlapping faces. In order to get around that problem, we can use the naming convention that we created previously, where we named everything LP and HP. Now, in order to have that information plugged into the software so it knows only to match pieces that have the same name and a convention of LP and HP, where we have this portion over here where it says match, instead of going to always, we're going to click here and change it by mesh name. This will only bake from the same name meshes, and the only thing that's going to be different is going to be the suffix. By default, this thing is set as /high, but I want to have an underscore HP because that's what we used, and underscore low to underscore LP. This way, the program is going to see the HP and the LP that we created. So now, once I have these set, I'm not going to change any of the other options. I'm only going to hit here, so it's going to bake all the textures. Since we put it at a 4K resolution, it's going to probably take a few seconds, maybe about 20 to 30 seconds. So I'll be back as soon as this thing is done. Well, this literally took about 5 seconds. As soon as I stopped recording, it finished. So as you can see, now we have all the details from the high poly baked over to the low poly model. In this case, it's not really visible, mainly because we have a rather clean model. But if we had any different model with sharper edges, all the details would have been a lot better, or a lot more, well, visible. All right, so once we have this, what we can see is the textures. If I click on F1, you can divide the viewport into what you're seeing in the viewport and the actual texture. If you press F2, you only see the object, F3 only the material. So now, with all the details baked from the high poly, I want to start and adding in the actual texture. Now, to add in the actual texture is very simple. Since we won't be creating any of our own, we're going to come down to the middle of the screen where it says shelf, and here you have different side options. From here, I'm going to scroll down to materials, and here you have very simple materials that you can choose from, or we can go below it and choose a smart material. Now in this case, I'm actually going to choose a smart material and show you what that thing does. This chair I initially had it in my mind as a leather chair, so let's try and find something that's going to be a leather. If you go over here, you're going to see that in here you have some materials called leather. If I click on it, you should see a preview. You can see a rough leather. We have a leather seat, beige, leather seat dirty, for a leather sofa. Let's try the leather sofa. If I want to apply this material over to my chair, I have to put it in here where it says the layers. So click on the leather sofa and pull it over here. As soon as this thing is done, it's going to take this the calculations and it's going to apply it to our entire model. So far, so good. But at the moment, I think the leather seam are a bit too big. And the second problem is that, well, it's applied to the entire model and we don't really need it. So let's fix the first thing first, the seam or how big or the tiling. What I want to do here is click on this little arrow, and this will open up all of the objects that have an influence of how this thing is going to look like. So if I click on these buttons over here, this thing will show me what's the difference that extra layer does. As you can see over here, this thing basically gives it the worn edges look. I don't want to have a worn edges, so I'm simply going to turn that thing off. The second thing is the leather color. As you can see, this thing controls the leather color, and the third one, again, the leather color. All right, so click on one of these guys, and you see a lot of different options here. Now, what I want to do here is increase the scale here. So where it says UV scale, and you have a 6, you can click on the little pencil next to it, and let's try a 12. By increasing this, well, we made no changes. So let's try and see if maybe it's the one below it. So this one has a UV scale of 3, change this to 6, and here we go. Now we have a much smaller seam, or a much smaller not scale, but tiling of the texture. I'm actually okay with how this thing looks. So we fixed the tiling. Now we want to fix the positioning of this leather texture, because we only want it to be on the seats. In order to do this, we need to use a mask. Masking here works very simple. All you got to do is right click and add a black mask. What this thing is going to do is now remove all the information for the leather from the entire chair. On the left side over here, you have a brush. Now this brush can apply color. This color is basically chosen from here, where it says white. And since we are painting that white on the mask, we're only telling it to basically show us that material over here. And that's what we want. We want to have this thing appear on our chair. But if we go ahead and manually do this, we're going to have this problem. It's going to overlap on the side, and that's not what we actually need. So in order to have a more precise application of where we want to have the seam or the material, I'm going to go over here and from the top, choose a polygon fill. This will allow me to individually choose which polygons I want to have the textures be applied to, or even better, instead of individually going one by one, I can go over here where it says mesh fill and click on the mesh. This thing will apply the texture to the whole mesh. As you can see, this is exactly what we want to have on our mesh when it comes to the leather. So with that done, we can continue on to the other portions of this chair. Now we can choose what kind of a texture I would like to have for the chair, or what kind of a material. So from here I can scroll down, and here we have this wood beech veined. So I can click and drag this thing either above it or below it. Now you're going to notice as I'm moving this material, if I put it over here, you have this white line following it where it's going to be in the layer system. If I put it above layer 1, it's going to stay there, and it's going to be below the leather sofa. If I put it above the leather sofa, it's basically going to apply this to the whole material, and I don't want to get that. So I'm going to click on this thing and move it below it. This way, the leather sofa and all of the information that has been added only to the back seats will stay, and everything that is not covered by that mask will have this thing applied to it. All right. So first thing that I can see here is that I have some options that I can choose, and if you go in here, you're going to notice another thing. This is not a simple texture or a simple bitmap, but it's actually a substance created by Substance Designer. This means that I can individually change all of the options that I have here. For example, if I click on this button over here, I can remove the dirt, which is something that I actually do like, as there's no need to have dirt on this chair. Second thing is I can control if I want to have veins on this wood or not. In this case, I want to have a really nice wooden texture, no veins, so I'm going to turn off the veins as well. Next thing is the wood fibers. Now, if I turn these off, this is going to take away a bit of the wooden look. I'm actually going to keep those. And the last one is the base wood. This thing controls basically the color. And here you have another effect, but we will not be going into effects now. But if you disable this, you're going to notice that we have that effect is giving it that worn out look. So you either choose to leave it on or you can turn it off. For now, since I want to have a clean look, I'm going to turn off the MG dirt. And now, while I'm here inside the base wood, I have this option where it says color. If I choose it, and from here I can basically choose the tone of the chair that I want to have. I want to have a nicer, warmer chair like this, so I'm okay with this. Another thing that you can control here is the roughness or the reflection of this chair. Here, for example, if I leave it on like this, it looks like a nice distressed wood. It really looks like it's been worn, hasn't been lacquered or anything. So if I want to get around that and I want to have a nicer lacquered wood, all I have to do is beneath it where it says roughness, decrease the roughness slider. So if I go to 0.4, it's going to give me a nicer lacquered look. You're going to see it here. There we go. Basically, this is going to control how shiny this chair is going to be, like so. I'm happy with how this thing looks. So I'm going to collapse this as well. And now the only thing that's left here is the back sides over here. And for these, for the connectors, I want to use a simple steel texture, or I can go up and choose some of the other materials that have metallic look to him. So let's try with the silver armor and see how this thing is going to look like. All right, awesome. I can use this. And again, I'm going to apply a black mask to it and only mask over this plate, this one, and the one on the bottom. Now, in case this happens, sometimes this can happen. When you select an element and it selects the rest of it, what you can do is hop on over to the UV chunk fill. And now when you click it, it's only going to apply that texture to the set UV set. And with this, we have that thing applied only there. Now, with this, I can call this done, or I can spend just a tiny bit more time and add in some extra bit of details here. For this, I'm gonna go in here and click on add a layer. And on this layer, while I'm here, I'm going to scroll down, and here I have where it says material. I'm going to turn off metal, roughness, and color, and I'm only going to leave height and normal. The reason for doing this is because I want to have in some screws over here. So in order to get that, I'm going to switch down to where it says hard surfaces. And from here, you can see that we have a few normal maps from different types of screws that we can use. Here I want to use a normal, well, let's try and find one that's going to work for us. Well, let's try with this one, screw square. So click on it, or I just use a normal screw. Click on this one and drag it over to where it says normal. Now, if I come over here and click here, you're gonna notice that we have this huge screw here. Since this is not the size that I wanted, I'm gonna hit the bracket size on my keyboard and decrease the size of those screws, something like this. Put it to the sides, like so. And there we go. Now, the only reason why these screws are not well defined is simply because we're lacking in the texture quality. This is the 2K texture that we're seeing. This is basically what we created at the starting of the project. But if you want to see better definition here, what we can do is on the size over here, from 248, simply switch it to 496. It's going to take a while to, like, not a while, but a few seconds to recalculate everything. It's going to put a bigger strain on your PC, but at the end, you will see all the changes that we do in real time and with a lot more details. Now you'll see more details even on the wood and even on the texture for the leather that we made. And keep your eyes over here with where the screws are. And as soon as this thing is done, yeah, here we go. Now we have a lot better defined screws. So again, quickly come over here, add in the extra screws that we want to have over here as well. And another thing is, if you want to get a better look from the light, all you have to do is hold down Shift, right click, and move the light around. Or you can just choose it over here where it says environment rotation. So with this, we can see we have some nice reflections. We can even go below here, which is, well, a bit of an overkill if you ask me, because it's probably you'll never get to see this part, but while we're doing it, why not do it properly? All right. And there we go. So with this, I'm actually happy how this thing looks so far. So the only thing that's left at the moment is to basically bake out the textures with all the information. So go to File, Export Textures, and here, while you're here, this is what you want to do. In case the config hasn't been set to Unreal Engine 4 packed, what you want to do is go over here and choose that preset. Click over here, choose where you want to save your textures, select folder, and click on export. And that's about it. But before you do that though, make sure you have the resolution that you want to have your textures in set over here. You can choose a 4K, 2K, even an 8K, although this thing does have the tendency from time to time to give you an unexpected result. So it's, as it says, it's an experimental size. So for now, I'm going to use a 4K resolution and export out. As soon as you click this, it's going to take a few seconds, and then it's going to give you the notification that all of the textures have been exported and the option to basically open the folder containing those set options. There we go. Open folder, and in here you have 3 textures, in which one is the diffuse, you have another one that's the normal, and the third one is the combination where you have the occlusion, roughness, and metallic channels all into one texture. And with this, we are basically more or less done. So I hope you guys had fun. You managed to learn something new. If you do have any questions, leave them below. I will meet you in the comment section of the video. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. And if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.